Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm back in the sewing room and I am finishing up a UFO project and also starting on a pair of pajama bottoms that I've had the fabric for way too long, and so I'll take you along with me. This is an unfinished pair of pajama bottoms that I started a long time ago, and so I was just finishing up the seams on that with a zigzag stitch, and now I am folding over the top to make a waistband, and then I will stitch that down and then add some elastic to the waistband. And now just finishing up the hem on the pant legs, and I'm done. And it only took me 5 years and 30 minutes to do it. This is my helper dog today. She has a bed and a blanket underneath the work table. The pattern that I'm using is Simplicity number 3971. And be sure to look on the back before you purchase a pattern for clothing to make sure that it is the right measurements and right size for you. Starting the new project now with fabric that I've had for quite a while. And so I cleaned everything off of the kitchen table and just put that down. I pre-washed the fabric and refolded it, and so now I've smoothed it down and put the first pattern piece down. If you've never sewn clothing from a purchased pattern before, you'll notice that on the pattern there is a long two-sided arrow. And what that is for is to show you how to lay the pattern down for the straight of the grain of the fabric or the directional pattern of the fabric. And since I am working with plaid, I need to be extra careful that I follow that arrow. Otherwise, my plaid will be going all different ways. The good thing about sewing pajama bottoms is that there are only 2 pieces to them. And so I laid out the first piece and pinned it onto the fabric, and now I'm cutting it out. And I always get a little panicky that I'm not leaving enough for the hem, so I just, using my eyeballs, I just added a couple of inches to the length of this. But you may want to use a straight edge or a tape measure or some kind of measuring device. I believe that this is the back piece of the pants, and I am cutting 2 pieces of that pattern. So once I am through cutting that out, then I am just going to fold the fabric up with the pattern inside of it so I don't get mixed up, and then pull the rest of my fabric out onto the table and do the other pattern piece, which I believe was the front. So I'm doing the exact same thing, laying out the pattern piece and pinning it and then cutting it out and making sure that that arrow is going straight. If you are new to sewing, a simple pattern for pajama pants is probably a good thing to be one of the first things that you sew. It's very forgiving, and most of the times you don't wear it out in public, so if you mess up, who cares? So onto the sewing machine now to sew this all together, and it doesn't take as long as you might think it would. I did this in a morning in a couple of hours, and that was only because I had some interruptions. So first of all, you are going to take one back piece and one front piece and match them up together, right sides facing each other. It is going to be the side that is completely straight with no curves in it, and you're going to match up those little arrows or diamonds or darts, whatever you want to call them, and then sew that seam. On this seam, I only made 1/4 of an inch seam, but that was only because I knew that the pieces, the pattern pieces were a little small for me. So normally you would do 1/2 inch of a seam, or if you're old school, a 5/8 inch of a seam. And then you trim it down after, and I kind of don't get that, so I just did a 1/4 inch seam. So a front and a back piece matched up together, and sew it. I'm using purple thread because my fabric is purple. But if you didn't have a close match, you could use a neutral, something like a gray or a beige, or even a maroon red, depending on what neutral matches your fabric the best. This is easy sewing. I didn't even have to pin it. If you're a brand new beginner sewer, you might want to pin it. But if you go slow, it's usually not necessary. My machine has those red lines or markings to show me where 1/4 of an inch seam is, and I love it. If you don't have that on your machine, there's special tape that you can buy that you can put on your machine to mark where the 1/4 inch seam would be, to make it easier to see. I have markings on that plate, but I find them really hard to see when I'm sewing. The legs are quite wide in this pattern, pajama pant pattern, but so if you wanted a skinnier leg, I'm sure you can find a pajama pant pattern with a skinnier leg, or just make it skinnier yourself. I am going to finish that seam off with a zigzag stitch, but first I want to get all of my straight stitch sewing done, and then I can do all of the zigzag finishing sewing at one time. Next, I am folding over the leg, right sides together, and matching up the darts again. And then I am going to start sewing that leg from where the curvy part ends. Then I'm going to just stitch that all the way down, and then that will complete the first leg of the pajama pant. And then I will go ahead and do exactly the same process to the other leg with the other two pieces that I have left. So now that the straight stitching has been done, I am going to cut off the darts and then put the zigzag feature onto my sewing machine and finish off these seam edges on all of the seams that I've just done. If I had done a 1/2 inch or 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, then I would have trimmed the excess fabric close, about 1/4 inch close to the straight seam line, the straight stitch line, and then done my zigzag stitch to close off and finish off the seam. And the purpose of this is it just makes the seam look a little more finished. It keeps the fabric from unraveling and leaving a bunch of threads. So see how nice that looks? If you have a serger, that would really make pajama pant making really go fast. You're probably not going to see this the best, but what I'm doing now is I've got one pant leg wrong side out, and then I'm making the other pant leg right side out and putting the one that is right side out inside of the other pant leg and lining it up for the seams and the crotch line so that I can sew that together. But as with everything else, you want right sides together, and then just line up the darts or those little arrow diamond things, just like we've done on the other parts of the pant legs. And I'm just matching up the seams that will go in the crotch. For this, I did use my pins, and I started by lining up the seams in the crotch first so that they would nest and line up together once they were sewn. And so now I am just going through the curvy part here and putting a few pins in, since that's a little trickier to sew. And I did more of a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the crotch line, just to help myself, because it was a little harder sewing with the curvy line. Getting ready to sew the crotch now, the crotch seam. And since it is a curvy seam or a curvy part of the fabric, just make sure you give yourself plenty of time. Go slow, or it can get away from you really quick. This is what it looks like with the two pant legs joined together. This pattern does not have a fly or a drawstring with it, so it's pretty simple sewing. And I'm sure that you could find a pattern that had a fly if that's what you were looking for. That noise is my dryer going in the background. At this point, you'll want to try the pajama pants on. Make sure they fit around your hips and your bottom. And I felt like the waistband there was a little too much of it, so I am just doing a quick trim here. I'm not measuring, I'm just eyeballing it. You can get out your rulers if you want. I'm also evening up or cutting to make even the bottom of the pant leg. And when I tried it on, I also figured out how much of a hem I needed to do on this. I'm just trimming these up so that the pant legs are both even with one another. When I finished the UFO, I had one leg longer than the other, so not by a lot. Nobody would know it if I didn't say anything. So just trying to even this up here. At the waistband, I am folding over about 1/4 of an inch, and with a hot iron, just pressing that down. All the way around. At the waistband, I am folding over 1¼ inches and then pinning that down. Not very good filming here, that's for sure. I forgot to do the zigzag finishing on the crotch seam, so that's what I'm doing now. I have the waistband all pinned together, and so I am just going to sew that down really close to the edge with a straight stitch. I'm going to leave about a 2-inch opening. I started sewing in the back of the pants and a little bit away from the seam, and then I will stop a little, about an inch away from the seam, so that I have room to put the elastic in, or a way for the elastic to go in. I folded over the hem at the bottom of the pants legs 2 times, and the measurement was just shy of an inch. And so I pinned that around on both pant legs and then sewed that down like I did the waistband. The instructions call for the elastic to be 5/8 of an inch wide. And I don't have any of that, and I didn't want to go to the store. I have a little bit of a 1/2 inch left that I used on my UFO. So I am just going to use this 3/8 of an inch elastic that I already have. You'll want to get the wider elastic for yours. It makes for a sturdier and more stable waistband. And so I am just measuring that around my waist and then taking in a couple of inches from that. And then I'll cut it. To insert the elastic into the waistband casing, go ahead and get a couple of safety pins and pin one end to the waistband, and then take the other safety pin and pin it to the elastic, and then that is going to help you to move the elastic through the waistband to the other end so that you can sew it and secure it. So once I've got that pulled through the casing, then I overlapped both elastic ends about 3 inches, and then I just went forwards and backwards to secure it with stitching from my sewing machine. Then afterwards, you're going to want to try it on and make sure that it is the right measurement. And if it is, then go ahead and smooth it down and then sew that casing down so that there's not a hole there. So there you have it, pajama pants completed, and now I'm all ready for the fall weather should it decide to show up. And even got a UFO or second pair of pajama pants completed. They're a bit more wild in pattern, but I love them. I will make the tops to them in the coming weeks. And I'd like to challenge you to look in your cupboards and find any UFOs that you have or unfinished objects and complete them this week. Thank you so much for joining me. Please press the like button and subscribe. It's free. You can catch up with me here in the next video. Goodbye.